guys, I feel like you have changed my perspective, I will say, because like we were talking about it and I'm like, your life's gonna be over when you have kids. Like, you better make sure you did everything. You went on every trip. And then when I see you guys go on trips, when I see you guys like, you're still hanging out with us, you know what I mean? And you make time and and we'll see what happens with baby too. But I will say, like, even that, it just made me realize that like you guys still maintain your relationship, your friendships, and some sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
And then also like with the house, right? You guys moved to the house, and then you decided maybe it's not for you, and maybe you're gonna move to the city. And I'm like, okay, it makes me feel better because it just doesn't feel like it's a quick 180 where like your entire life changes. You go from like living it up in the city to 2 kids deep in the suburbs, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Grandmas.
Grandmas. We're really fortunate with that. Our moms take help with Bella.
Man.
In fact, his mom was watching Bella right now.
Right now. That's why we're here.
I will say, to your point, though, like the concerns are so valid, because I remember the first days after coming home from the hospital, and I've never shared this. I was sitting up. I remember I had just fed her. It was like 2 a.m. He was knocked out. I just put her down, and I remember wondering, like, how much is within my control as far as how much my life is going to change, because you feel the weight and the joy of how permanent parenthood is, and it can feel really daunting and really scary. And I just remember sitting there wondering, like I can't let go of my old self. Like, I still want to be the multifaceted woman I am, right? Because before Bella, I was a wife, I was a girlfriend, I was a daughter, and I feel like sometimes if you choose it, it's one thing, but I feel like sometimes women feel forced into you're now just a mother. And that's the only role that you have, and the role that you are obligated to play all the time. So,
which, I mean, you're really great at that. First of all, you are. And I think you do a really good job with giving each space of your life the time that you need. And so you do block off times where you're like, okay, I'm taking Bella on a play date. Or when you guys have times, I just don't follow those boundaries. And so I call.
I was just going to say, he's looking at you like, man, I wish I got the time that Jeanette gives her.
No.
Well.
I totally get everything that is happening right now. You know, and there's no bitterness. There isn't any sort of resentment or anything like that. Trust me. I resent you. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Yeah. You know, so I have a question for y'all. So we've had conversations, right, about family planning, and I think for me, it's a little strange in the sense of I'm not ready yet as far as I need, because my jobs are insane. So trying to run a business, help Mona with her businesses, and my job is very busy. And I don't play that. I'm not going to have kids, and I'm not going to be around. I'm not doing that. So for me, it's out of sight, out of mind. So I already know I'm like we've talked about 2 years from this month, I'm going to plan to probably either transition maybe, or do something that's more chill. I have more time. Mona,
his boss is watching right now.
I know. Like, mind your business.
But subscribe if you don't want to mind your business.
But I think Mona, she's like she said, she feels like she's gone through a transition. She's more ready now, and it's more on her mind. And I'm like, okay, so how far out should we talk about it? How far out should we test our fertility? You know, when should we start planning? Like, that's where we are now, and really trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I would time it out with when we're gonna have our sex.
That's what I mean. I legit was. So I told him yesterday. I was like 20, 25, 6.
No, I would say one of my biggest regrets when it comes to parenthood is not finding out sooner that it was gonna take time and effort and a whole lot of money as far as the fertility treatments, because I would have planned accordingly. And I would have, I don't know, like even the house would have been different. I probably would have come back from Philly sooner, honestly. So that you and I would have had more time with just you and me.
But you had to get the right job, though.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Because maybe if you came back to DC and you were miserable, we're not having.
He did not want to deal with
it. No, because we wouldn't have Bella.
That's true.
You wouldn't even have gotten to that place mentally.
I would just make sure that you guys are fully aware of, as much as possible, of the options you have, how much time it's going to take, making sure you guys travel a lot, which is great. In fact, that's something Robert and I wish we had done, and we can still do now, but wish we had done more before we had Bella. but making sure that you spend a lot of time with each other, that you build a solid foundation, because a child can throw the relationship for a loop. Like, it's just really hard. I remember seeing this video on TikTok where a guy was saying like he misses his wife. Like, they miss each other because you now have this third person in the family who requires and deserves a lot of time.
But I feel like, and we talk about this too, is like when you're in the grind, and it's like, I mean, he works in Big Law. I'm like a full-time correspondent, and it's like when you're doing that, and every minute of your day is filled with work, you want to have your life to have meaning. And so for me, it's like when I start thinking about kids, it's like when I'm like, we need to live beyond ourselves. Like, we need to, number one, I feel like we'd feel more connected. I guess maybe that's a false thing, but in the sense of like, we're family, and then we like, you know, have this cute little child that's half of us.
We're together, spend time together, and not on a computer screen.
And it just gives like your life more meaning, and you feel like once you're at work, you feel like you're working towards something.
I will say 2 points. One, you will never find him more attractive than you do when he becomes a father. I'm gonna tell you that much. It just it shows them in a completely different light. And it's very attractive. Even when you're giving them a bath with the diaper on.
Was that a me thing?
I was like, yo, that sounds like a y'all thing.
Yeah.
The second thing I was gonna say, oh my goodness. Shoot, I was gonna say a second point. But I was gonna say it does put them in a completely different light. And it's really cool to see the relationship evolve that way. The second point I was gonna say actually is I remember when I was at work, I'm trying to think of how to frame this. And me being a mother, it just wasn't as supported in the workplace, like whether it was pumping, it just I never got any holidays off. It was like, good morning, Merry Christmas. Good morning, Happy Thanksgiving. Good morning,
Happy New Year.
It was every holiday.
The sleeves slowly changing in your dresses.
So I just remember you start to become fiercely protective of what it means to be a mother and what your child deserves of you and from you. And so it emboldened me to walk away, because it's almost like it's almost just like, how dare you know what I mean? Even with our maternity leave, like, it was a fight to get the time that we deserved, and then we found out in hindsight that we actually didn't get the full time that we wanted. And so it's just like, I don't want to constantly, if I have the power to, constantly fight for time with my daughter. And that gives you a lot of times the courage to make important life decisions. Going to your point as far as giving your life new meaning. One of the things I say is like, I personified death. Like, I looked at it like a bully, and like it was mocking me. Like, for me to grieve and to be shut down and to not be able to function, it was almost like I was rebelling against grief. Because to grieve and to process those emotions was to admit defeat. And so that was my way of like, no, like, I'm not going to keep me from functioning. I'm not going to let it keep me from functioning.
Is there anyone that you talk to?
I ended up going to a therapist for some time. But I didn't really talk about it. No. I will say the first time I really cried and opened up about it was with Robert, actually. I had met him a year later, and I broke down and cried for the very first time with him. And that was really helpful. But me not processing it for a long time I do not recommend it. Because eventually you have to confront it. But I still don't talk about it. I still don't post about it. Nothing like that. What about you?
For me, I don't know why I wanted everything to go back to normal. Like, I had this fear that everything would change and I would never be the same person again. So I like remember wanting to go out immediately. Like, I wanted to be back into my life and go back to school and do everything. I do remember, though, I will say, you lose someone who's a big part of the household, right? And so I remember telling my mom, I was like, you know, do you need me to drop out? Like, do you need me to help? I wanted to help. I wanted to be like, let me contribute. I'll take a gap year. I'll contribute. Like, and she was like, absolutely not. Move on to the next topic. And I was like, oh, good. Because I got to go back to school. Like, that's not an option. Because she was saying like, that's what you could do for me is you can finish. And so I wanted just to go back to normal. And I remember doing too much too soon, thinking that nobody cared.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't open up to my friends. I just felt like this isolated, like they're having a great time. They're in college. They're young. They don't want to hear this.
Yeah. You don't want to, did you not want to burden them with that?
I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. I've never really been someone who's easily opens up.
Right.
So it wasn't second nature to me to just be like, hey guys, this is what I'm going through.
Right.
And I felt like certain bids for connection that I was trying to get, I didn't. But we were all like, 17, 18 years old. And so I don't even think my friends knew how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried to like go back into my normal life and try to process things. Don't recommend that either. I think you should really, I wish I didn't know about therapy at the time.
Yeah.
I look back and I was like, oh, I could have really used it. I could have really used it because I lived with a lot of regret because my freshman year of college, I hated the school I was going to.
Mm.
And I felt like my parents were forcing me to go to that school. I was 17 years old. I wasn't the nicest because I was going through like whatever teens go through.
Yeah.
And so I remember just living with a lot of regret that I could have been nicer to him.
Yeah.
That lasted for a really long time. And I just remember I was on a plane. Can't believe I remember this story. I was on a plane and this guy randomly sat next to me. And he was talking about how he has like a daughter who's 17. And he was like, God, I try to do so much for her. Oh. And she just, he's like, it's almost like she doesn't want me around or. And so I just remembered that. And I was like, I was probably like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember like the older I got, some of my biggest regrets is that in my 20s, I didn't get to have a new relationship. Because I got to have a new relationship with my mom where I saw her as a human being and not just like your parent, right? Yeah. I got to see her in a new light. I got to see that she's just trying her best.
Right.
That she is
like she's doing this for the first time too.
She's doing this for the first time too. And I hated the fact that I never got to like reestablish an adult relationship with my dad. And there's so many times that I would like just try to talk to him. Sorry. And a lot of my dreams were just apologizing.
Yeah.
But
I think parents, I like to think on the other side somehow. Either as a parent, you get it. You were a teen before.
Yeah.
Or on the other side, somehow they see, I don't know, like you just get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm hoping that life is beautiful to that extent that there is some closure on both sides. Mm-hmm. One of the things I will say, speaking of closure, that I got was, I remember I was at CNN actually interning, and he wanted me to keep going. You know how our parents are, like he didn't want my internship to be disrupted by him being sick. He was in hospice already. And he said, it was interesting. I was at like a Bible study with a friend and we were reading some verse in the Bible and I can't remember. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like he's going to die. Because I had been in denial up until that point and I was like, he's going to die. And
what do you think it was about that moment that made you realize it?
I don't remember, but it clicked for me. Like this is going to happen. And I literally told my boss the next day, I have to go up to Ohio. He was staying in Cleveland. And I barely had enough, like my car, I don't know how it even got to Ohio. I drove up. My dad was telling my mom, don't let her come. I got in, I walked in, and he was laid out in the bed. I remember he went like this. When he saw me, I gave him a hug. We all slept in that room in hospice. And the next day, my mom was actually going to go, because she had been taking care of him. She was going to go out on a run. I slept in the adjacent room to take a nap to catch up on sleep. And it was just a curtain dividing us. And she said she was going to go on a run. And I said, no, I don't know why I said it this way, but I said it in Spanish. I was like, no, mommy, stay so you can watch over papi and me. She said, for some reason, she decided to listen to me. And she sat down at the foot of his bed I was in the next room. She saw him take a deep breath and he passed. She said, if you hadn't come and told me that, I would have never known if he was looking for me and I could have done something. So you gave me the gift of seeing him take his last breath. And I remember she was at the foot of my bed. I was like jolted out of sleep and she was just sobbing like, he's dead, he's dead. And, you know, one of my biggest regrets, as kind of like an aside, is my siblings weren't there. They had to drive from Rhode Island. My sister had to come. So I thank God for the gift of like having the intuition or something to know to drive up and be there. Like I got there the day before he passed. I called my sister, and in my moment of like shock and like kind of angry, I regret the way I gave her the news. I was like, Papi died. She was like, I'm like, he's dead. And I kind of said it like mad. And I regret that because you always remember when you find out. And I didn't. I said it. You know how it is. Like you just, in the moment, you're like, he's like, what are you not understanding? He's dead. I've never talked to her about this, but I regret the way I delivered the news to her because it kind of dropped like a bomb. And I didn't consider in that moment, like, you're going to be the person to tell your sister that your dad is dead. I really regret that. Like, it shook me to my core and it alters who you are as a person. You also don't realize how much your parents are the reason behind why you do so many things. Like, I remember thinking, like, every beautiful moment and every success I have in my life will now be tainted by this. You know what I mean? Like, I remember looking at it like, you have this beautiful dress on, but you have this big stain on it.
Yeah. What about your wedding?
Wedding was tough. Especially, it sucked that he died a year before Robert met him. I will say one of the sweetest gifts that Robert got me was he knew how close I was to my dad, and my dad really appreciated good penmanship. And Robert knew that. So he had reached out when we were dating. He reached out to my sister and he told her to send him a document with my dad's signature. And he got me a bracelet with a charm with his signature engraved in it. And that's when I knew he got it. Because I feel like you're like this too. Like for me, I'm a sucker for thoughtful gifts. I don't like flashy. I don't like, unless it's connected to like something special. But like for me, it's like, did you really think about the significance of this? Is it tied to something I told you? Like, did you really listen? And that's when I knew he got it. At my wedding, I just danced with my brother-in-law and my brother. And I had an empty seat for him at the front. But, you know, it's always bittersweet.
Always.
You know, how about you?
I will say I didn't even, it's so weird. You think you process something and you think you move on. And I actually admire the fact that like you were able to talk. I can't, right? Like, and I get mad at myself sometimes because I'm like, it's been so long. Like, when are you going to figure it out? It's been like 15 years now. So it's like, when are you going to figure it out? But I didn't realize how deep seated it was until after we had the like small ceremony for my wedding. We went to Italy, Jordan and I, and I just started crying and I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized like in those moments, it's like, it reminds you that you won't get to share that with someone. Yeah. And I think I told you like same thing with when I was on World News for the first time. I'm like, this is who I want to see. Like I did this for you. And you don't get to share those moments. Like my mom wanted me to go to South Korea with her and I'll do it because I don't know if I'll regret that. So like there are certain moments where I'm just like, I will drop everything and do it because I don't know if this is going to be the moment that I regret later.
Gosh, yeah.
I do think about it because I think my dad was around 54 when he passed away. And it's like, Jordan and I are in our 30s. So it's like, do I only get 20 more years with you? I literally think I only have 20 more years. I was going to say it helps you in a way, like, right? If there's any good that comes from it, it's the fact that you can relate to anyone on a human level. Yeah. Like I think I was covering this flood in West Virginia. And I mean, I grew up in the West Coast, right? Like that was the first time I was in West Virginia. And there was like a flood and there was a gas explosion in the house. So this man lost his wife. And I remember thinking there was in no other circumstance would I ever be in the same place as this man. Like we are from completely different walks of life. And when he broke down, I broke down. And we're just here hugging, talking about his wife, right? And he was happy to be able to talk about her, and it was still fresh. But I also think that it's like the great equalizer. It's like death touches everyone. And it brings people together on a human level.
And it humbles you.
It humbles the hell out of you. 4 days before my period, I am like, everyone hates me. I'm so sad, and you just feel so down. I feel like there's a boulder on my chest, and I can't, like my chest gets tight. The minute I get my period, it's over.
Well, it's totally different.
Weird. And then I move on. And I thought I was going crazy. And I was telling you guys, I had a conversation. No, actually, I'll tell you. I didn't notice it until probably around like 2017, where I was in Cleveland. And I remember one day I was driving and I was like, I could just drive into this median right now. Like, I just cannot handle this. And I'm not that person, right?
Yeah.
I've never had depressive episodes, and I could not figure out why I would get so sad. And then I started paying attention. I realized it's only 4 days before my period. And I still wasn't gonna talk about it because I was like, I don't need Jeanette's calling me crazy. I don't need her to be like, okay, let's check on her. 5150. So I just didn't talk about it. And I had dinner with my cousin like earlier this year. And she started talking about how she read this book and how she suffers from PMDD. And she is, mind you, the most jolliest person. And she was like, I'll just get suicidal ideations. And I'm like, okay, all right, let's talk about it. So then I realized that I don't mind and I'm open to talk about it because, again, it's like a light switch goes on and you know it's connected to your cycle. And I also just learned how to deal with it. I don't take anything personal. I realize I'm like, we'll get through this. We'll get through this. But it really affects your whole life.
Yeah, and truly people can feel suicidal. Like there's actually my same publisher, there's another author, Shailene Gupta, who wrote a book called The Cycle about PMDD. And she's a journalist and she herself had PMDD, and she both shares about her personal experience where she truly like could not function. Like, and then, you know, also giving that like journalistic approach, like, why is this, you know, why don't people know about this?
Right.
You know, so many people have it. And it is so important to raise awareness because I think a lot of people do suffer silently because, you know, one, they think it's just PMS, and when it truly is like something much more severe.
And I hate when people blame stuff on PMS. Like if anyone, if my husband ever told me it's
become like a joke.
Yeah, it's like,
no,
no,
you're PMSing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so there's so much stigma around PMS that you're like, do not dismiss what I'm going through if I'm upset as PMS. So it took me a long time to even just, you know, evaluate that and realize that it might be connected to it.
So I met, I don't think we've shared how we met our significant others.
Yes.
So I went for an interview in Little Rock for news.
Little
At
Rock?
the station, at the station in Little Rock, and he was the weekend sports anchor there. So I met him on my interview, and we didn't hit it off initially, but we then became really, really good friends. And our sense of humor was where we really connected, and we didn't really even consider dating, at least not on my end, until a few months into it. But it was great because we had a solid foundation. That said, we were both broke. We were both just paying our dues, building our careers. Like, you don't make a lot of money at all when you start out in this business. So we got to kind of struggle together. And now we can look back on what we've built and know that we laid down, you know, brick by brick, and look back on everything that we've created. With you, oh no.
You said, oh no.
I was anti-dating because I had a fear that just like her, I bounced from like market to market. So I was in Lynchburg, Virginia. I was in Cleveland. And I was like, I'm going to meet that man that's a lifer. He is not leaving Lynchburg, Virginia. And now I'm going to be trapped 2 kids deep. Like, I was not trying to find a serious relationship whatsoever. But I will say, my mom got married young. And her words to me was like, don't do it. Just like, use your 20s to get to where you're going. Don't like ignore that side of yourself, right? Like, you pursue your dreams. And so I took that as a man will derail your dreams.
Oh, interesting.
Because you're gonna then have kids, and then now all of a sudden you're a stay-at-home mom, and he's living his life and he has his career, and you're like, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Oh,
You know?
yeah. And that's both. There's no wrong answer there, because absolutely your 20s should be, you're having the time of your life.
Yeah.
You're out there. You're struggling. Like, That's where people get things wrong. In your 20s,
Yeah.
a majority of people are struggling, and a lot of people look at social, they look at how other people are living, and it's jacking up
Oh my
their
goodness.
perspective.
Yeah.
So one of the things I had to do, because he's from Chicago, I'm from Rhode Island, but we were in a place that we had no other ties to other than work. And I had to like deactivate Instagram from my, like just take it off my phone, because that highlight reel of other people living their best lives, you're also seeing the best of it.
Yep.
It can start to make you doubt either your relationship, your career choice, the dues that you're paying, is this even worth it? And a lot of good relationships are derailed, as you said, or ruined by these like situations, these relationships that don't really exist in reality, right? Because no relationship is 100% good.